Derby County's injury drama continues as Ryan Nyambe picked up his own injury in the warm-up for the Plymouth Argyle game. Now, obviously, for Derby County, injuries have been a big problem across the course of the last few months, and not just the last few months, but even the last couple of years. And Ryan Nyambe is just the latest of a long list of players to suffer that fate. Now, obviously, Derby County have had Kane Wilson and Ryan Nyambe recently return from injury, but obviously that hasn't quite gone to plan. Obviously, when we talked about Ryan Nyambe a few weeks ago, if I remember correctly, I'm sure John Eustace said in the press that he'd be out for 4 to 6 weeks. He then went on to play 90 minutes just a few days after that interview, and obviously has been involved in every game since. When it went into the Plymouth Argyle game, obviously Kane Wilson came off after about 75 minutes and was replaced by Sondre Langas. And obviously Ryan Nyambe would have been the perfect option to come into Derby County's team and potentially help Derby to that 3-2 victory. Now, obviously, we don't know if they'd have won the game with Ryan Nyambe, but we know they did without it. So maybe it was the right call in the end. But after the game, John Eustace confirmed with BBC Radio Derby that he got injured during the warm-up and obviously would have been the perfect replacement for Kane Wilson when that happened, and he's picked up a slight muscle injury, which is something which Derby County have to get to the bottom of. Now, for me, we've spoken a lot over the course of not just this season, but previous seasons, and obviously, even in the most recent few videos I've made, we've spoken a lot about injuries. And for me, Derby County's main issue here is it always seems to be key players that are picking up those injuries. You look at Curtis Nelson when Erin Cashin picked up his injury, Kane Wilson, you look at Jorgen Salverson, who would have probably been a key cog in this Derby County team had he not been injured, Sondre Langas' injury, who obviously is playing through the pain barrier with injections and everything else that comes with it at the moment. And for me, it always seems to be players who can have a massive impact for us. And obviously over the course of the next few months, it's not even a few months now, it's probably 6 weeks until the end of the season. There's about 8 or 9 games left to go, and Derby County have got to find a way to stay in the division. Obviously we've gone 3 wins on the trot, but having these injuries doesn't make it any easier. You even look in the youth academy and there's injuries going on down there as well, with the likes of Niall McAndrew, who will hopefully return from injury soon enough. But it's one of those for me where Derby County have really got to do something. I don't necessarily believe it's related to anything John Eustace is doing, because I believe that, in my personal opinion and from what I've learned across the course of my time in sport and things like that, it's that fitness is very, very... it goes based on what you've done, essentially. If you don't train for 6 weeks, you lose fitness. If you train every day too much for 6 weeks, you probably get injured because you overload yourself. And what I feel has happened is that from pre-season till Paul Warne, well, maybe even Matt Hamshaw, etc., moved on, I think Derby County were very overloaded when it came to training. And that obviously then impacted in results, in my opinion, because you saw players were absolutely shattered after 60, 70 minutes of a game. And now, under John Eustace, we're starting to see less of that. Obviously, there's still changes that need to be made and things like that. But I feel like we're not making changes for change's sake. And there's no one using the gassed out experience anymore, which is, in my opinion, it's good that that's gone. Because as Derby County fans, we want to see players pushing 100% all of the time. And if you can't give 100%, I'm sure that Eustace and co will notice that and pull them off. Now, for me, when it comes to injuries, Derby County's major problem has always been that, especially over the course of the last 12 months, it always seems to be a 2 to 3 month injury. You look at who's gone out recently, Dejan Brown's season, Curtis Nelson's obviously season. You look at Joe Ward's season, Corey Blackett-Taylor, no idea when he's back. Kane Wilson was, 8 weeks. Nyambe's first injury was 3 months. You're just constantly going around in a circle of losing X, Y and Z player for 2-3 months at a time. You've got Kemar Roof, who's out for, I think it's 4 to 6 weeks. And it's really, really disappointing when you look at the squad of players that we've got available, and then you look at the players who are on the injury list. Kemar Roof improves this squad. Curtis Nelson improves the squad. I'm not saying improves the first team, but certainly improves the squad. Blackett-Taylor improves the squad. Mendes Lang's now back, which is obviously good. Who else Who else have we got that's out? Joe Ward, I think, improves the squad. Not necessarily the first team, but definitely the squad. Selverson improves the squad. Obviously, if Langas ends up having to have surgery because he can't continue to play through, he's another player who would improve the squad. And it's a real difficult scenario that Derby County find themselves in. When you've got a player like Ryan Nyambe, who's now out for his second spell, maybe third spell of the season, and is a massive piece of the puzzle at Derby County. He's very, very good defensively. He's had a massive impact on the club since joining in September of 2023, if I remember correctly. And you can't really turn down his influence, and you can't turn down the influence of those other players. Like Curtis Nelson, I think, had played every single league minute since he'd joined the club until he picked up that ACL injury, which I do believe he played through, which realistically, had he not played through it, would it have been a full ACL or would it have just been a strain? And these are sort of the questions you've got to ask for yourself. Sometimes playing through that injury barrier isn't always the right thing to do. And that's something which will have to be discussed at Derby County across the course of the next few months and even years, really, because obviously when you lose a player like Curtis Nelson, who was a mainstay in the starting 11. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't improved now since he moved on, since he's gone on the injury table, because I do believe we have. I think the back three we've got now is better than any back three we'd put out previously. I think Matt Clark is excellent, Forsyth brilliant, Nat Phillips certainly doing his job as well. And obviously, you probably say Curtis Nelson probably slots in ahead of Phillips, but ultimately I think Phillips has done a lot better recently than what he had done earlier in the season after being given a shot to. And that's something which, when you lose a big player like Curtis Nelson, it's all about how you recover, how you replace them. And I think we replaced him excellently with Matt Clark and Sondre Langas, already having Nat Phillips in the building. Obviously, then look at the right back position. Corey Smith was our right back when Paul Warren took over. Corey Smith and Jason Knight, because we didn't have anybody else to play there. Jake Rooney's played there, doesn't really play at the moment. But Kane Wilson, Nyambe, Ward, right back options. Ward is always injured, Nyambe's now injured, and Wilson has had his injuries. And we've never sort of brought in an option that is good enough to cover that position. It'll be interesting to see if that then turns out to be Sondre Langas, and you can obviously have your say down in the comments. But there's a lot for John Eustace to contend with over the course of the final few weeks of this season, and we have to keep sticking to that mindset of we're not victims, and we've got to make sure that we keep ourselves in this Championship division. There is a massive opportunity for Derby County here, and should we get to the summer with investment potentially pending, according to John Percy, we could be in a really, really good position. It looks as if season ticket prices aren't going to be increased in phase one, which is obviously massively important for those loyal supporters who will get their money in straight away, like I will do with the 2 season tickets that I purchase. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops with ticket prices and things like that, because I personally don't believe ticket prices really impact a club Championship and above. I think when you look at like the likes of League One, you look at League Two, I think it can have an impact, and obviously in the non-leagues it certainly has an impact, but when it comes to Championship and above, I don't believe it has any sort of impact. But we'll get into that in a completely different video. Now, if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll catch you in my next video.